Security! We have a situation here! The hostess's voice cracked through the VIP lounge like a whip. Sarah Mitchell jabbed her finger at Marcus Washington, a black man in an $8,000 suit, treating him like he'd just pulled a weapon instead of showing his first-class boarding pass. "Sir, this lounge is for invited guests only. You need to leave, now." The words hit like a slap. Every head turned. Phones emerged from designer purses. The security cameras captured every humiliating second as Marcus stood there, calm as death, his briefcase bearing a logo that would soon destroy everything Sarah thought she knew about power. She had no idea she'd just triggered a $2.3 billion nightmare. In exactly 7 minutes, her smug smile would be gone forever. Have you ever watched someone's arrogance crumble in real time? What you're about to hear will leave you speechless. 3:47 p.m. Premium Airport VIP Lounge, Terminal 3. Sarah Mitchell had perfected the art of discrimination over 5 years of gatekeeping this marble sanctuary. She could spot the undesirables from 50 feet away, the ones who'd somehow scraped together enough miles for an upgrade, the ones who thought money could buy them respect. But Marcus Washington, he was different, dangerous even. His first-class ticket looked legitimate. The boarding pass bore all the right codes. But Sarah's instincts screamed warning. Black men in expensive suits were either athletes, entertainers, or fraudsters. And this one? He was too calm, too composed, too comfortable in a space where he clearly didn't belong. "These tickets can be purchased by anyone online," she announced, her voice carrying across the lounge like a prosecutor delivering a verdict. "Our VIP lounge requires invitation-only membership. I'll need to see your platinum card." The words were designed to humiliate. Around them, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Business travelers looked up from their laptops. The familiar blue glow of phone screens flickered to life as passengers sensed drama brewing. Amanda Wells, a pharmaceutical executive in her 50s, discreetly angled her iPhone. Her finger hovered over the record button. She'd seen this movie before. Wealthy white woman versus black man in a luxury space. The ending was always the same. Dr. James Thompson, a cardiothoracic surgeon waiting for his connection to Miami, felt his stomach clench. 30 years of practicing medicine, and he still got the same treatment in places like this. The assumptions, the challenges, the subtle ways authority figures questioned his right to exist in their world. Stream starting in 3, 2, 1. The teenagers at Table 7 had already gone live. Their TikTok audience, mostly high schoolers bored on a Tuesday afternoon, was about to witness something that would change their understanding of systemic racism forever. 7 minutes until boarding Flight 447 to Chicago. The announcement echoed through the terminal. Marcus checked his watch, a custom Patek Philippe with aviation symbols etched into the platinum face. The kind of timepiece that cost more than most people's cars. His phone buzzed. A text from Chicago board meeting, urgent, flashed across the screen. He silenced it with a swipe, but not before something else caught the light. A business card that slipped from his jacket pocket. Marcus Washington, CEO, in elegant raised lettering. He retrieved it so smoothly that Sarah missed it entirely. But the cameras caught everything. The phones recorded every detail. The evidence was building frame by frame, click by click. "Interesting timing," Marcus murmured, his voice barely audible above the ambient noise. Sarah's theatrical sighs filled the space between them. Her hand gestures grew more dismissive, more exaggerated. She was performing now, feeding off the attention, reveling in her moment of authority over someone who dared to challenge her domain. "I'm going to need you to step aside," she continued, her voice rising with each word. "Other passengers are trying to enjoy their experience." The phones multiplied. Amanda's recording had attracted 3 viewers, then 10, then 30. The comments began flooding in. "Not again." Someone call this out. This is 2025, not 1955. But darker voices emerged too. He's probably using a stolen credit card. Security should check his ID. Something doesn't look right. Dr. Thompson's hands trembled slightly as he gripped his coffee cup. He'd lived through enough of these moments to recognize the pattern. The way security would be called. The way he'd be asked to step aside for a moment. The way his dignity would be stripped away in front of strangers who'd judge him not by his achievements, but by their assumptions. Marcus's briefcase sat beside him, unremarkable except for a small, discreet emblem etched near the handle. WA Industries, in serif font, so subtle that most people wouldn't notice it unless they knew what to look for. Sarah didn't know what to look for. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time," she said, her voice now carrying the unmistakable tone of someone who believed she held all the power. "Please gather your belongings and exit the lounge. Security will escort you if necessary." The threat hung in the air like smoke. The phones captured every word. The live streams broadcast the humiliation to hundreds of viewers who were witnessing systemic discrimination in real time. Marcus's phone buzzed again. Another text, this one from Jennifer, board prep complete. He glanced at the screen, then back at Sarah, his expression unreadable. "You know," he said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made people lean in to listen. "I've been documenting incidents like this for quite some time." Sarah's eyebrow arched. "Documenting?" 47 cases in the past 12 months, all involving customers who looked like me, all in airports managed by the same parent company. His tone remained conversational, almost friendly. "It's amazing what patterns emerge when you have the right data." The words should have been a warning, should have made Sarah pause, reconsider, perhaps even apologize. Instead, they only fueled her sense of righteousness. "Sir, if you don't leave immediately, I'm calling security." She reached for her radio, her movements sharp and deliberate. The performance was reaching its climax. The phones zoomed in. The comments exploded across social media platforms. Marcus pulled out his phone one more time. One call. That's all it would take. His finger hovered over a contact labeled simply, "Implementation Team." Sarah's hand closed around her radio. Dr. Thompson leaned forward in his seat. Amanda's phone captured the tension in high definition. The teenager's live stream had attracted over 1,000 viewers. None of them knew what was coming next. None of them could have imagined the earthquake that single phone call was about to trigger. 5 minutes until boarding. Manager David Anderson materialized from the administrative office like a shark drawn to blood. 43 years old, 8 years of airport management experience, and a reputation built on maintaining order in his pristine domain. He'd handled everything from drunk celebrities to diplomatic incidents, but something about this situation made his pulse quicken. "What's the situation here?" His voice carried the practiced authority of middle management, firm enough to command respect, diplomatic enough to avoid lawsuits. Sarah's explanation poured out like rehearsed testimony. "This gentleman is attempting to access our VIP lounge without proper credentials. I've explained our invitation-only policy multiple times, but he's refusing to comply with basic security protocols." Each word was carefully chosen, each phrase designed to paint Marcus as the aggressor, the troublemaker, the one disrupting the natural order of things. David's eyes swept over Marcus, the expensive suit, the confident posture, the way he held himself like someone accustomed to being in charge. Something nagged at the edge of his consciousness, a whisper of recognition he couldn't quite place. But Sarah's certainty was infectious. Her 5 years of experience, her track record of protecting the lounge's exclusivity, her ability to spot the troublemakers before they caused real problems. "Sir, I understand your frustration," David said, his tone measured but final. But we have protocols that exist for everyone's safety and comfort. This isn't personal. We simply cannot make exceptions." The crowd thickened like blood clotting around a wound. More phones emerged from purses and pockets. The blue glow of recording devices multiplied exponentially as word spread through the terminal's digital networks. Amanda Wells's live stream had exploded to 847 viewers. Her comments section became a battlefield. "Call CNN right now. This is exactly why we need reform. Record everything." But the darker voices grew louder. "He's probably lying about his ticket. Security needs to check his background. Something's not right here." Dr. Thompson's coffee had gone cold in his hands. He'd witnessed this exact scene dozens of times, the way authority figures circled like vultures when someone who looked like him appeared in spaces where he supposedly didn't belong. The assumptions, the interrogations, the systematic dismantling of dignity. 4 minutes until boarding. The announcement crackled through the terminal's speakers. Marcus glanced at his watch again, that custom Patek Philippe with its aviation symbols glinting under the fluorescent lights. The timepiece told more than time. It told a story of success, of achievement, of power that nobody in this room could comprehend. His phone buzzed. Another text from the Chicago board meeting. Another reminder that billion-dollar decisions were waiting for his arrival. Another piece of evidence that would soon make this entire confrontation look like a cosmic joke. But the phones kept recording. The live streams kept broadcasting. The evidence kept accumulating. Officer Rodriguez appeared at the edge of the crowd. Latino, 26 years old, 2 years on airport security. His hand rested instinctively on his radio as he assessed the situation. David's subtle nod had summoned him, and now he found himself thrust into a confrontation he didn't fully understand. "Sir, I need you to step aside," Rodriguez said, his voice carrying the nervous energy of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. "We can discuss this situation away from the other passengers." The circle closed tighter. Staff and security, passengers and phones, all converging on Marcus like he was the center of some twisted solar system. The VIP lounge that had been a sanctuary of calm had transformed into a coliseum of judgment. "You're disturbing other guests," David continued, his voice cutting through the ambient noise like a blade. "This is your final warning. Leave immediately, or we'll have to involve airport police." The threat landed like a physical blow. The phones captured every word. The live streams broadcast the ultimatum to thousands of viewers who were witnessing systemic discrimination in real time. Marcus's briefcase sat beside him, that discreet WA Industries emblem catching the light. The logo meant nothing to Sarah, nothing to David, nothing to the crowd of passengers recording his humiliation. But it meant everything. In the distance, Flight 447's boarding announcements grew more urgent. Other passengers hurried past, some stopping to gawk at the confrontation, others deliberately avoiding eye contact with the drama unfolding in their exclusive space. 3 minutes until boarding. The teenager's TikTok had gone viral. 12,000 viewers and climbing. The comments exploded across the screen faster than anyone could read them. "This is insane. Someone needs to help him. Where's the manager? This is America in 2025. But the momentum was building against Marcus. The authority figures had spoken. The security presence had escalated. The social pressure was mounting for him to simply comply, to walk away, to accept his place in the hierarchy that others had created for him. Amanda Wells's phone trembled in her hands. She'd seen this movie before, and she knew how it ended. The black man would be escorted out. The white authority figures would return to their duties. The system would continue unchanged. Dr. Thompson closed his eyes, remembering his own experiences. The country club that had lost his membership application. The medical conference where security had questioned his credentials. The restaurant where he'd been asked to wait while his white colleagues were seated immediately. The pattern was as predictable as it was heartbreaking. Marcus looked around the circle of faces. Sarah's smugness, David's administrative authority, Rodriguez's nervous compliance, the crowd's mixture of sympathy and suspicion. He saw the phones recording his humiliation, the live streams broadcasting his defeat, the comments flooding in from strangers who thought they knew his story. He reached for his phone. One call. That's all it would take to end this charade. His finger found the contact labeled Implementation Team. The same contact he'd been building toward for months. The same contact that represented years of planning, documentation, and preparation. Sarah's hand tightened on her radio. David crossed his arms in a gesture of finality. Rodriguez's hand moved closer to his restraints. They had no idea what was coming. They had no idea that Marcus Washington's phone contained the power to destroy everything they thought they knew about authority, about power, about who really controlled the space they'd spent years protecting. The call connected. 2 minutes until boarding. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper when he spoke into the phone. But there was something in his tone. A quiet certainty that made the air itself seem to vibrate with impending doom. It's time. Yes, now. Full implementation. The words meant nothing to Sarah. Nothing to David. Nothing to the crowd of passengers recording what they thought was just another discrimination incident. But 30 seconds later, the clicking of expensive heels on marble echoed through the lounge like gunshots. Jennifer Liu appeared at the entrance, her executive assistant credentials gleaming from a lanyard that bore the same discreet logo as Marcus's briefcase. Behind her, moving with the urgent precision of people whose careers were about to implode, came two figures that made David's blood turn to ice. Regional Airport Director Patricia Hayes, 23 years of aviation management experience, the woman who could fire him with a single phone call, and behind her, Corporate Vice President Michael Zhang, the man who controlled the budget that kept this entire terminal operational. "Mr. Washington?" Patricia's voice cracked as she approached, her usual command presence replaced by something that looked suspiciously like terror. "We had no idea you were here." The words hit the crowd like a physical shockwave. Phones that had been recording Marcus's humiliation suddenly swiveled toward Sarah. The narrative was flipping in real time, and nobody understood why. Sarah's confusion was palpable. "I don't understand. Who is this man?" Patricia's face drained of color as she realized the magnitude of what had just unfolded in her airport. She leaned close to Sarah, her whisper carrying the weight of institutional collapse. "This is Marcus Washington. He's the CEO of WA Industries." The name should have meant something. Should have triggered recognition, apologies, immediate damage control. Instead, Sarah's blank stare revealed the depth of her ignorance. "WA Industries controls 47% of this airport's annual revenue," Patricia continued, her voice barely audible above the ambient noise. "Baggage handling, ground transportation, catering services, fuel systems, cargo operations. Without them, we'd be bankrupt within 6 months." The phones that had been documenting Marcus's humiliation now captured Sarah's face as realization dawned. The smugness evaporated like morning mist. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly as the full weight of her mistake crashed down upon her. Amanda Wells's live stream had reached 15,000 viewers. The comments exploded. "Holy shit! She's about to get fired. This is the best plot twist ever. CEO? Oh no." Officer Rodriguez took an involuntary step backward. His hand moved away from his radio like it was radioactive. David's arms uncrossed, his posture shifting from authority to submission in the space of a heartbeat. Dr. Thompson leaned forward in his seat, a knowing smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He'd seen enough of these moments to recognize the beautiful irony of assumption meeting reality. Marcus spoke for the first time since making his call, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd never needed to raise it to command attention. "This is the 48th incident in the past 14 months, he said, his tone conversational, almost friendly. Each one documented, each one recorded, each one analyzed for patterns. He opened his briefcase, the same one that bore the WA Industries emblem, and withdrew a manila folder thick with documentation that would soon become evidence in corporate boardrooms and legal proceedings. 48 complaints involving customers of color, all dismissed without investigation, all filed away as isolated incidents that somehow kept happening with remarkable consistency. Patricia's hands trembled as she accepted the folder. Each page represented a corporate nightmare, a legal liability, a systematic failure that had been festering under her watch. "But you see, Ms. Hayes," Marcus continued, his voice never rising above conversational level, "these weren't random customers. They were my executives, my board members, my business partners, my family." The revelation hit like a second earthquake. The phones captured every word. The live streams broadcast the systematic nature of the discrimination to thousands of viewers who were witnessing the most spectacular reversal of power they'd ever seen. Each incident was documented not just by the victim, but by our security consultants. Voice recordings, video evidence, witness statements, medical records of the psychological impact, financial assessments of the reputational damage. Marcus withdrew a second folder, this one marked confidential in red lettering. The discrimination audit we commissioned revealed some fascinating patterns. Customers with names like Washington, Johnson, Williams, Jackson, 83% more likely to be randomly selected for additional screening. Passengers in expensive clothing, 67% more likely to have their credentials questioned if they appeared to be of African descent. The numbers weren't just statistics. They were weapons. Each figure struck with surgical precision, carving away another layer of the airport's defenses. "But today's performance," Marcus said, turning to look directly at Sarah for the first time. Today's performance was the crown jewel, the perfect capstone to a pattern of systematic discrimination that's about to become very, very expensive. Sarah's face had gone from confusion to realization to pure terror. Her career, her reputation, her entire professional identity was crumbling in real time, broadcast to thousands of strangers who were watching her world collapse. "The beautiful thing about systematic discrimination," Marcus continued, his voice carrying the same quiet authority that had made him a billionaire, "is that it creates documentation, patterns, evidence. The kind of evidence that transforms individual incidents into federal civil rights violations." Patricia's knees nearly buckled. The folder in her hands contained more than complaints. It contained the blueprint for the complete destruction of everything she'd built over 2 decades in aviation management. "My legal team has been preparing for this moment for 14 months, Marcus explained, his tone remaining conversational despite the nuclear bomb he was detonating. Every incident cataloged, every witness interviewed, every piece of evidence authenticated and prepared for federal court." He snapped his briefcase shut with a sound like a judge's gavel. "The board meeting in Chicago?" Marcus smiled for the first time since entering the lounge. "We're not just discussing quarterly profits. We're discussing the systematic termination of contracts with any organization that fails to meet our zero-tolerance discrimination standards." The silence that followed was deafening. The phones captured every face in the crowd. Sarah's horror, David's panic, Patricia's desperation, the passengers' shock at witnessing corporate warfare in real time. 1 minute until boarding flight 447. The announcement seemed to come from another universe. The world had shifted so fundamentally that the normal rules of time and space no longer applied. Marcus stood, adjusting his jacket with the same calm precision he'd maintained throughout the entire ordeal. "Shall we discuss the details privately, Ms. Hayes? I believe we have exactly 60 seconds before my flight boards, and trust me, missing this flight would be very, very inconvenient for everyone involved." The threat was delivered with the gentle politeness of a man ordering tea, but the subtext was clear as crystal. The most powerful man in the terminal had just revealed himself, and the reckoning was about to begin. Emergency conference room, airport executive level, 4:23 p.m. The mahogany table stretched between two sides of an impossible war. On one end sat Patricia Hayes, flanked by corporate attorney Lisa Anderson, whose laptop screen reflected the desperate legal research she was conducting in real time. 3 airport board representatives had been hastily summoned from their afternoon meetings, their faces bearing the pallor of executives who'd just learned their world was ending. On the other side sat Marcus Washington, alone, calm, absolutely devastating. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Patricia's pen trembled against her notepad. Lisa's typing had grown frantic, each keystroke a prayer to gods of corporate law, who might somehow save them from the apocalypse sitting across the table. "Let's discuss numbers," Marcus began, opening a leather portfolio that contained the financial future of everyone in the room. His voice carried the same conversational tone he'd used downstairs, but now it felt like listening to your own execution order read aloud by a poetry professor. WA Industries maintains a $2.3 billion aviation services contract with this airport system. The figure landed like a physical blow. Patricia's pen stopped moving. Lisa's laptop screen froze mid-search. The board representatives exchanged glances that spoke volumes about the financial tsunami they were facing. "That contract represents 47% of your annual revenue," Marcus continued, turning to page 3 of the document in front of him. "Without it, you'd be forced to lay off 68% of your workforce within 90 days. The numbers weren't just statistics. They were surgical instruments, each one cutting away another layer of the airport's defenses with clinical precision. Your quarterly operational costs, $847 million. Your reserve funds, $124 million. Your credit line availability, $89 million. Marcus's voice never wavered, never changed tempo, never betrayed the slightest emotion. Total liquidity without WA Industries contracts, insufficient to maintain operations beyond 4 months. Patricia's calculator was working overtime, but the math was simple and brutal. Every number confirmed the same terrifying truth. They were completely, utterly, financially dependent on the man they'd just humiliated. "However," Marcus said, his tone suggesting the word carried the weight of salvation or damnation, "our contract contains several rather interesting clauses." He turned to page 14, his finger tracing lines of text that had been negotiated by teams of lawyers who'd anticipated this exact moment. Section 7.3, Zero Tolerance Discrimination Policy. Any verified instance of discriminatory behavior by airport personnel triggers immediate penalty assessments. Lisa Anderson's typing became desperate. She'd helped draft dozens of these contracts over her 15-year career, but she'd never seen this particular clause enforced. Most companies treated discrimination policies as legal theater, impressive on paper, toothless in practice. Marcus Washington was not most companies. "The penalty structure is elegantly simple," he explained, his voice carrying the quiet satisfaction of a chess master revealing checkmate. "First verified offense, $100,000. Second offense, $250,000. Third offense, $500,000. Patricia's pen resumed its trembling movement across the notepad. $100,000 times 48 documented incidents. The calculation made her physically ill. "But wait," Marcus said, and for the first time since entering the room, he smiled. "It gets more interesting." He produced a second document, this one marked with red seals and legal watermarks that screamed federal authenticity. "Today's incident constitutes the 49th complaint filed with our legal department, which means we've moved beyond simple penalty assessments into contract termination territory." The room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Patricia's breathing became shallow. Lisa's laptop emitted the desperate whir of overworked processors trying to calculate legal alternatives that didn't exist. Section 12.7. Contract Termination Provisions. Upon reaching 50 verified discrimination incidents, WA Industries reserves the right to terminate all service agreements with 30-day notice. The words hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. The termination penalties are quite specific, Marcus continued, his tone suggesting he was discussing the weather rather than financial annihilation. $500 million assessed immediately upon contract cancellation, payable within 60 days. Patricia's pen clattered to the table. Lisa's laptop screen went dark. The board representatives stared at each other with the hollow eyes of people watching their retirement funds evaporate in real time. Your total liquid assets, including credit lines and emergency reserves, $213 million. Marcus's voice remained steady, conversational, almost gentle. The mathematical reality is rather elegant in its simplicity. He leaned forward slightly, the first change in his posture since entering the room. You cannot afford to lose this contract. You cannot afford to pay the termination penalties. You cannot afford to fight this in court. You cannot afford to continue operating as you have been. The silence that followed was profound. Outside the conference room windows, planes took off and landed in a world that still made sense. Inside, the fundamental laws of corporate physics had been suspended. However, Marcus said, and the word carried the weight of divine mercy, I'm not interested in destroying this airport. I'm interested in fixing it. He slid a third document across the table. The paper was expensive, the printing crisp, the formatting precise. It looked like what it was, a comprehensive blueprint for institutional transformation. My demands are simple, specific, and absolutely non-negotiable. Patricia's hands shook as she accepted the document. Each page outlined requirements that would reshape every aspect of airport operations, from hiring practices to customer service protocols to executive accountability measures. Immediate termination of all personnel involved in discriminatory incidents, no severance packages, no recommendation letters, no appeals process. Sarah Mitchell's career had just ended with the clinical precision of a legal document. Mandatory unconscious bias training for all customer-facing employees, conducted monthly by certified diversity consultants. Attendance tracked, performance measured, non-compliance results in immediate termination. The old ways of doing business, the casual prejudices, the assumed hierarchies, the comfortable discrimination, were being systematically dismantled. Implementation of AI-powered interaction monitoring systems. Every customer service encounter recorded, analyzed, and scored for bias indicators. Real-time alerts for discriminatory behavior. Quarterly public reporting of all incidents and resolutions. Technology would replace human judgment. Algorithms would eliminate the prejudices that had festered for decades. Establishment of a $50 million diversity and inclusion fund, administered by independent third-party organizations. Annual contributions of $5 million for the next decade, with public accounting of all expenditures. The numbers were staggering. The accountability was absolute. The transformation would be complete. Non-compliance with any of these requirements triggers immediate contract termination, Marcus explained, his voice carrying the finality of natural law. No appeals, no negotiations, no second chances. Patricia's voice cracked when she finally spoke. Mr. Washington, surely we can discuss reasonable timelines. 48 hours, Marcus interrupted, his tone suggesting the timeline was as immutable as gravity. Every requirement fully implemented within 48 hours, or WA Industries terminates all contracts and assesses full penalties. He stood, buttoning his jacket with the same calm precision he'd maintained throughout the entire ordeal. The media attention from today's incident is already building exponentially. Social media is exploding. Your choice is mathematically simple. Implement meaningful change immediately or face complete financial collapse. Marcus paused at the door, his hand resting on the handle. Oh, And Ms. Hayes, the next time one of your employees decides to judge someone by their appearance, remember that you never know who you're really talking to. The door closed with a soft click that somehow sounded like thunder. 48 hours later. 6:00 a.m. Tuesday. Sarah Mitchell's termination became effective at exactly 6:00 a.m., delivered via automated email to an inbox she'd never check again. No severance package, no recommendation letter, no appeals process. The hospitality industry's informal network, the one that had protected mediocre employees for decades, suddenly turned against her with the efficiency of a corporate immune system rejecting a virus. Her LinkedIn profile sat dormant, a digital tombstone to a career that had died in 7 minutes of recorded humiliation. The pharmaceutical executive's live stream had been viewed 2.3 million times. The teenager's TikTok had exploded to 8.7 million views. Sarah Mitchell had become a cautionary tale, a case study in how quickly arrogance could transform into unemployability. Manager David Anderson received his suspension notice at 6:15 a.m. 8 years of airport management experience, reduced to mandatory sensitivity training sessions conducted by the same diversity consultants he'd dismissed as corporate theater for years. His probationary period would last 18 months, monitored by AI systems that would analyze his every interaction for signs of bias. Officer Rodriguez kept his job but found himself reassigned to baggage claim, his security clearance suspended pending completion of advanced bias recognition training. The demotion came with a clear message. The old ways of handling situations were extinct, but the real transformation ran deeper than individual consequences. The Respect and Dignity Protocol launched at exactly 12:01 a.m. Wednesday morning. Every customer-facing employee, from security guards to restaurant servers to baggage handlers, found themselves enrolled in monthly unconscious bias training programs. The sessions weren't perfunctory corporate presentations. They were intensive, uncomfortable, and designed to excavate the systematic thinking that had enabled decades of discrimination. Dr. Thompson, the cardiothoracic surgeon who'd witnessed Marcus's humiliation, became the airport's first chief diversity officer. His quarterly reports would carry the authority of someone who'd lived through both sides of the equation, who understood discrimination not as an abstract concept, but as a lived reality. The AI-powered monitoring systems activated simultaneously across all terminals. Every customer service interaction was recorded, analyzed, and scored for bias indicators. Voice pattern recognition identified hostile tones. Facial recognition software detected dismissive body language. The technology wasn't perfect, but it was relentless. Within 6 hours, the system had flagged 17 interactions for supervisory review. Within 12 hours, 3 employees had been suspended for discriminatory behavior. Within 24 hours, the entire airport workforce understood that the rules had changed permanently. Amanda Wells, the pharmaceutical executive whose live stream had documented the original incident, leveraged her viral moment into a corporate consulting business. Her message was simple but powerful. In the age of smartphones and social media, discrimination came with immediate, measurable consequences. Her first client was the airport itself. The customer feedback system transformed overnight. Anonymous reporting through a dedicated app allowed passengers to document discriminatory behavior in real time. Each complaint triggered automatic management alerts, mandatory review processes, and public accountability measures that made cover-ups impossible. The $50 million Diversity and Inclusion Fund began operations within 36 hours. The first disbursement, $500,000 to establish bias recognition training programs at 3 major universities. The second, $750,000 to fund unconscious bias research at medical schools nationwide. The third, $1.2 million to create scholarship programs for minority students pursuing careers in aviation management. But the most revolutionary change was invisible to most passengers: the systematic documentation of success. Monthly reports showed discrimination complaints dropping by 73% in the first quarter. Customer satisfaction scores reached all-time highs. Employee retention improved dramatically as workers found themselves operating in an environment where respect was mandatory, not optional. The teenagers whose TikTok had captured the original confrontation found themselves invited to speak at high schools across the country. Their message resonated with a generation that had grown up with smartphones and social media. Discrimination wasn't just morally wrong, it was strategically stupid. Patricia Hayes survived her professional near-death experience, but barely. Her public apology aired on every major news network, standing behind the same podium where she'd once delivered optimistic revenue projections. Now she outlined comprehensive policy reforms with the mechanical precision of someone reading her own professional obituary. "We failed Marcus Washington," she admitted, her voice carrying the weight of institutional shame. "But more importantly, we failed the hundreds of passengers who experienced similar treatment while we looked the other way." The ripple effects spread beyond the airport itself. 17 other aviation hubs implemented similar bias monitoring systems within 6 months. The FAA began drafting federal guidelines based on the airport's model. The hospitality industry's trade associations started sharing best practices instead of protecting problematic employees. Marcus had weaponized accountability with surgical precision. The changes weren't perfect. The technology occasionally misidentified neutral interactions as biased. Some employees resented the constant monitoring. A few passengers complained about political correctness gone too far. But the fundamental shift was undeniable. Systematic discrimination had become systematically impossible. Every day, passengers of all backgrounds walked through the terminal with dignity intact. Children observed authority figures treating everyone with respect. Elderly travelers weren't dismissed. Women weren't condescended to. People of color weren't automatically suspect. The old assumption that discrimination was an inevitable part of human nature had been replaced with a new reality. Bias was a choice, and choices had consequences. Marcus Washington had transformed 7 minutes of humiliation into decades of systematic change. He'd proven that intelligence defeated prejudice, that strategy conquered hatred, and that the quiet power of accountability created more lasting impact than any act of revenge. The revolution had been televised, live-streamed, and documented in real time. And it had worked. 6 months later. Same VIP lounge, 3:47 p.m. Marcus Washington stood in the exact spot where his humiliation had been broadcast to millions. But this time, he wasn't alone. Beside him stood 3 young black entrepreneurs, winners of the WA Industries Aviation Scholarship Program, a mentorship initiative born from that day's 7 minutes of systematic destruction. The lounge buzzed with authentic diversity. The staff, now extensively trained and continuously monitored, served passengers with the genuine respect that should have been standard from the beginning. The marble floors reflected faces of every color, every background, every economic status. The changes weren't perfect, but they were real. Every setback contains the seeds of systematic transformation, Marcus told his mentees, his voice carrying the same quiet authority that had dismantled an entire discriminatory system. The question isn't whether you'll face judgment. The question is what you'll build from it. Dr. Thompson approached with his quarterly diversity report. The numbers told a story of institutional metamorphosis. Discrimination complaints down 87%, employee satisfaction at record highs, customer retention improved across every demographic. The ripple effects continue expanding, he reported. 23 airports have implemented our protocols. The Department of Transportation is drafting federal guidelines. We're not just changing one terminal. We're changing an entire industry. Amanda Wells's consulting firm had grown from viral moment to legitimate empire. Her client list included Fortune 500 companies terrified of becoming the next cautionary tale. Her methodology was simple. Assume you're being recorded, because you are. The teenagers whose TikTok had captured the original confrontation were now college sophomores, their anti-discrimination activism reaching millions of young people who'd never considered how unconscious bias shaped their daily interactions. Their message resonated with a generation that had grown up with smartphones. Discrimination wasn't just morally wrong, it was strategically catastrophic. Marcus's phone buzzed. Another text from another airport CEO requesting emergency consultation on bias elimination programs. Another corporation asking for systematic accountability frameworks. Another institution recognizing that change wasn't optional, it was inevitable. The irony wasn't lost on him. Sarah Mitchell's moment of prejudice had triggered the most comprehensive anti-discrimination program in aviation history. Her attempt to humiliate him had backfired so spectacularly that it had protected thousands of future passengers from experiencing the same treatment. Power without purpose is tyranny, Marcus reflected, watching his mentees absorb the lesson. But power with accountability? That's how you change systems, not just situations. His custom Patek Philippe, the same watch that had ticked away those 7 minutes of humiliation, now measured time in a fundamentally different world. A world where assumption had consequences, where prejudice had costs, where discrimination had become systematically impossible. Remember, Marcus told the young entrepreneurs, you never know who you're talking to. That person you're about to judge might just be the one with the power to change everything. Marcus Washington had transformed 7 minutes of humiliation into a lifetime of systematic progress. He'd proven that intelligence defeats prejudice, that strategy conquers hatred, and that the quiet power of accountability creates more lasting impact than any act of revenge. Now it's your turn. Have you ever been underestimated? Judged by your appearance? Dismissed because someone thought they knew your worth? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone else to stand up, speak out, or find their own path to systematic change. If this story moved you, smash that share button. Let your network know that dignity isn't negotiable and that transformation is possible when we refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. Subscribe and hit that notification bell for more stories of people who refused to be defeated, who turned their setbacks into systematic comebacks, who proved that the most powerful weapon against prejudice is the intelligence to fight back strategically. What story of justice and transformation would you like to hear next?